Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. The Peter DeWitt webinar will begin in 5 minutes.
Peter DeWitt.
Joined.
Hello, everyone. Welcome, ladies and gentlemen. Today's featured webinar is Peter DeWitt on Dignity for All, Safeguarding LGBT Students. I'd like to go with just a few housekeeping rules first. This webinar, we will have the opportunity to do some multiple choice questions or yes or no questions that Peter will provide throughout the webinar on various different slides. If you click on the emoticons on the left column, you'll see a happy face and a person with a hand. Those are the emoticons that you can use to answer Peter's questions. You'll see there's, as I just mentioned, you can raise your hand, or if you have a question, or you can use those various emoticons to answer Peter's questions. As well, we also have multiple choice, or if you want to do, if you want to type a question or you have any responses that you would like to type on the bottom left-hand corner in the chat room, you can just type your questions or comments and Peter can read those anytime throughout the webinar, and Peter will be happy to answer those as we progress. As well, there will be multiple choice. If you would like to answer his questions with the multiple choice questions, you can just use the emoticon with the letter A, and if you click on that, it'll provide the answers A, B, C, or D to answer his questions. As well, there will be yes or no questions, and if you click on the emoticon with an arrow, it'll give you, I'm sorry, a check mark. The check mark will be for yes, and the red X will be for no. So we are very happy today to introduce Peter DeWitt. Peter has been a principal in upstate New York since 2006. Prior to being a principal, he taught elementary school in several city schools for 11 years. In addition, Peter is an adjunct professor in the Graduate School of Education at the College of St. Rose and has presented at state and national conferences around the United States. Since July 2011, Peter has been writing a blog titled Finding Common Ground, which is published by the renowned and very respectable Ed Week. In addition, Peter is a freelance writer for Vanguard magazine, which is geared for School Administrators Association of New York. He has also had various articles appeared in journals such as or journals at the state, national, and international levels. And also on this webinar, if you use promo code D12783, which you can see on the slide now, you will get a 10% discount on his book, Dignity for All, and that promo code is good through August 31st, and his book is available at Corwin.com. So please let us introduce Peter DeWitt.
Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining me today. If you could, when Dwayne was actually talking about all the different questions I'm going to ask, it made me think that you're probably thinking I'm going to give you a multiple choice test at the end, and I'm not. I'd just like to find ways to make the webinar as engaging as possible. If you could, in the chat section, it would be great if maybe you could just tell us where you're participating from, whether it's city, state, territory, or whatever. And you can start putting that in the side because I'd really like to see that. All right, thank you. I see that it's starting. Sweltering, California, is that actually a real city, or is that just the way the heat is today? All right. Like Dwayne said, I've been in elementary education for a while now. 11 years as a teacher and 6 years as a principal. I did my doctoral dissertation on safeguarding LGBT students a couple of years ago and wrote the book for Corwin over the past year, and it was published in March. So I really appreciate the fact that you guys are here. I see a lot of people over on the West Coast, and Canada, which is great. First, I'd like to say thanks for participating because it wasn't too long ago that magazines, LGBT magazines, were actually covered in brown paper bags. And many of you may know that some of the bookstores would have LGBT sections, but they were in the back of the bookstore. And I do worry sometimes when I'm getting into a webinar like this that I might be preaching to the choir. So if anything, I know that a lot of you probably have as much or even more experience than I do with LGBT students. So I'm hoping that we can find a way to engage you on the side here and get some real dialogue going through 21st century skills, of course. We have to address the issue before we can make it a non-issue. Because when I write for Education Week for the Finding Common Ground blog, one of the things that I find when I write about LGBT issues is people will write to me and say, why do you even have to talk about it? What's the big deal? We treat everybody the same. The reality is if you're just saying you treat everybody the same and you never mention LGBT issues, then you're not treating everybody the same. So it's important to at least address the issue in schools before we can make it a non-issue. And one of the examples that we can use from the past couple of weeks would be the Boy Scouts of America. And although they're a private organization and they have the right to do what they want, one of the things that happens through their decision of not allowing LGBT students or adults in is that they're sending a message that LGBT people aren't as qualified or aren't as good as heterosexuals. And I think that that can be a harmful message to kids at a very young age. So here we go with some of the questions, and this is new for me, so we might fumble along together. But how can your school better support LGBT students? Is it A, ignore the issue, B, make sure they're in the same classes, C, provide specific language and school codes of conduct, or D, include curriculum that addresses LGBT topics, E, both A and B, and F, which is both C and D? If you could answer that, that would be fantastic. Very good. I see that's starting to happen. I'll give you a couple of seconds to finish up. And I know we have people joining at the same time. We have about 100 people signed up for the webinar, so people are going to be coming in slowly. That's right, it's F. All of you guys that put F is absolutely correct. It's important that we provide specific language in school codes of conduct, and we include curriculum that addresses LGBT student topics. And as I go through this, you're going to see that a lot of school districts just don't do that. All right, these are my goals for today. Yeah, it's the first time it's good to get an F. Very funny, Stephanie. My goals for today are to provide some background on LGBT issues and then provide you with some ideas to implement in school, and then possibly give ways we can keep the conversation going after this is all over with. What I would like to know, and through the chat box on the left, is what are your goals for today? If you could type in some stuff, I'll give you about 30 seconds to type some things in so I can look over and maybe take a few notes. That would be fantastic. What are the specific goals you have? Everybody must have some sort of issue going on in their school system or want to address these issues better. Learn to create board-wide policies. Very good. I will definitely get into that. Become aware of the issues. Well, thank you for coming. Ideas of starting a GSA, that would be great. What would an effective GSA do? You guys are just, this is fantastic because hopefully I'll be answering all of your questions. And if I don't, I'll give my email address at the end so you can always contact me separately as well. So I want you to know that this isn't just a one-shot deal where we'll talk for about 45 minutes. I want you to keep going. How to help teachers who are resistant so that they can be advocates for the children of community members and other parents. That's fantastic. How to handle a very political charged topic with parents. Yes, Stephanie, I probably will get into that a little bit too because I've had experience with that. So those are great. Thank you very much for doing that. And you can actually keep the dialogue going on the left-hand side if you want to. Expanding conversations and collaboration, deepening understanding of issues facing LGBT students. Awesome. Okay. So here we go with another yes or no question. Far more students are coming out now than in the 1990s. And there's a reason why I asked this. Oh, we have some mixed results there. Don't worry. You're not going to get graded on the test, so it's okay. I'll give about 10 more seconds for you to put an answer in. Love to hear from everybody. The answer is actually A. There are more students coming out now than in the like 1980s and 1990s, and I know I didn't put 1980s in there, so I shouldn't, but since the 1990s, there's been kind of a, more and more kids have been coming out. So this is one of the reasons why in the 80s and 90s, most LGBT students didn't identify or maybe didn't know. You had popular things like Ellen came out in her sitcom, and then of course Will and Grace was a very popular sitcom. Students are actually coming out at an earlier age, and that's one of the reasons why I wrote the book, because schools really aren't prepared for that to happen. And I just did an interview with our local NBC affiliate, and when I had mentioned that some students know their sexual identity by the age of 10, the anchor was actually very surprised by that, but that's some of the research that's actually in my book, Dignity for All. And not all adults are open to gay people, so we have to keep in mind that as much as people may have progressed, we still have people that have not progressed at all. All right. Lack of exposure to the LGBT community is one reason why heterosexual adults discriminate. A, true, B, false. Or I should say yes or no. And you can keep answering. Very good. Look at that. Everybody has the same answer. Unless, of course, you're looking on each other's papers. But yes, that is true. Exposure is one of the key elements. People do not know what they have not been exposed to. So if they don't know a gay person, or they may not think they know a gay person, they don't necessarily know the issues that come with it. There are adults who are literally scared of gay people, and I think we've seen that both in the media and probably in our own publics or communities that we live in. And there's a large spectrum in the LGBT community, just like in the heterosexual community, that, you know, I think there's a spectrum of people, of LGBT people. And not everybody knows that. They kind of go with what they see in the media, and sometimes the media hasn't been as kind to the LGBT community because they play the stereotypes. This is one of the reasons why I thought this was an incredibly important topic, and it's what I read when I was doing my doctoral research, is that 84.6% of LGBT students reported being verbally harassed, 40% being physically harassed, or 18% being reported physically assaulted at school in the past year. This was from a study done from 2009. 72 heard homophobic remarks such as faggot or dyke frequently or often in school. And that was done by Joe Coscu and the rest of the people at GLSEN, the Gay, Lesbian, Straight Education Network, which is an organization I do work with, and I read the research quite a bit. So if you don't know about GLSEN, you should look them up. Equal treatment. One of the things that I hear from readers and sometimes from teachers is I treat everyone the same. I don't need to segregate between who is straight and who is gay. Now that I understand you might not call people out in the middle of class, you do need to understand that not all issues are the same, and that just by saying you treat everyone the same isn't good enough. If you're not using common language, lesbian, gay, straight, transgendered, questioning, those are things that are kind of showing that you're kind of ignoring the issue in a way. So common language is really important. So that's what I get into. But you do have to protect them from against being abused for being gay. All right. Don't ask, don't tell. This was a policy that I think was in the military, but it's been happening in our nation's schools. Like I said, I've spent going on 18 years in the public school system, and because I write for Ed Week, I actually hear from public school people from around North America and around the world. And there's a large don't ask, don't tell policy. The topic makes educators uncomfortable. Administrators are concerned about community pushback, and we know that happens because that came up in the chat already on the left-hand side. It's often accompanied by a religious argument, and you know, I really don't get into a religious-based thing when I'm talking about it. I just know that LGBT students deserve a place at the table. Adults have biases toward the LGBT community, and why do they have to talk about it so much? And I'm going to get into an example of that right now. In Albany, New York, where I live, there's an organization called In Our Own Voices, and they do a lot of work in the African American community. And in the summer of 2010, they actually had a campaign called I Am Gay campaign, and there were probably about 4 billboards that were put up around the Capital District, so that's Schenectady, New York, Albany, New York, Troy, New York. And really all it was either there were a couple of gay men or a few lesbians or just a mixture of people from the LGBT community who happened to be African American. And one of the reasons why they did that was that there's this issue with the African American community where some men are on the down low. They don't like to admit the fact that they're gay, and it was sort of talking about how the African American community should have some pride where this is concerned. So they did an I Am Gay campaign, and it just said the words I am gay. And there was public outrage by politicians and community members who didn't understand why the billboards had to be out. And I kept looking thinking, what is it about the billboards? Because there were literally only 4 of them that were around. And people were just concerned about the fact that it said the word gay, and they kept thinking, why do they have to talk about it so much? 4 billboards out of hundreds of billboards in the Capital District. What was ironic is that down the street about a half a mile, there were billboards for gentlemen's clubs. And there were women who were half-dressed, and nobody complained about those. They only complained about the I Am Gay campaign. I thought that was very interesting that would happen. And the billboards have actually stayed up since. This is a very well-known quotation by a school leadership expert named Todd Whitaker. And Todd actually gave a quotation for the book. When the principal sneezes, the whole school catches a cold. This is neither good nor bad. It is just the truth. Our impact is significant. Our focus becomes the school's focus. So just say yes if you think this really needs to start from the top down. I just want to see you throw that in the chat section, so I know you're still awake. Very good. Absolutely, it starts from the top down. One of the people who is supposed to be joining us today is actually my new school superintendent. He is highly supportive of me writing about these, about LGBT topics, and without that kind of support, you know, you just have to wonder how much I could really have the freedom to write. So Todd Whitaker was absolutely spot on when he talked about that it really starts from the top down. So we need to get principals, we need to get administrators on board. Besides harassment and bullying, LGBT students are at risk of a few different things, which many of you may already know: running away from home, participating in at-risk behaviors at a greater level than their heterosexual peers, and dying by suicide. And anything that I mention in here, I might not tag the research in the PowerPoint, but it's definitely within the book. I didn't want you to think I just pulled it out of the side. 1 in 3 have reported committing at least one self-destructive act. Gay and lesbian youth make up approximately 1/4 of all homeless youth in the U.S. And although that's statistics from 1995, it has not changed much. And Edwards says, whether we realize it or not, we as educators are dealing with a hidden minority of gay and lesbian students as well as gay and lesbian parents. And that's one of the key changes that we've seen in the past 10 years as well, is we have more LGBT parents that are coming into our school system. So if we don't have these safeguards in place for LGBT students, you're kind of ignoring a percentage of your parent population as well. As leaders of their schools, principals strive to ensure a positive learning environment for all students, one where students feel safe and free from harassment. And this is another thing from GLSEN, more research. It's from Teasing to Torment. School Climate in America by GLSEN found that the most common reasons for bullying and harassment are physical appearance, sexual orientation, gender expression. Showing that LGBT-related characteristics account for 2 of the top 3 reasons students are singled out for mistreatment. And I would say that one way or another they count for all 3, not just the top 2. And what I need to stress too is that there are administrators and there are educators that will say these issues are not happening in their school, and that is absolutely false, because I teach in a K-5 elementary school system in a suburban neighborhood, and I've had to deal with some of these issues at the elementary level. So they're happening at the middle school level, they're happening at the high school level. So when I was doing my doctoral research, it really came down to 3 things: the coding of what the real issues were, the interviews I did with administrators and educators, and then some leadership findings that I thought were kind of interesting. One of the biggest, the major themes was that building climate affected LGBT issues, safeguards, and then the supports they had in place. In New York State, we've got the Dignity for All Students Act, which was adopted in 2010, and it became legal as of July 1st of this year. The goal of DASA, which was passed, is to amend education law. The bill authorizes the Commissioner of Education to create policies to safeguard sexually diverse students in all schools in New York State. So that means our school board policies and school codes of conduct have to talk about how school administrators are going to protect students based on sexual orientation. It's not the only thing they talk about. They talk about size, they talk about race, they talk about gender, but they talk about sexual orientation, which was a huge step because not many school districts or many states take that lead. One of the interviews that I did when I was doing my doctoral research, which I thought was really eye-opening, was a school leader in he was a grade level principal in a large suburban school. And he said a couple of weeks ago we were meeting the parents to discuss risky business and sexual promiscuity among students, and it was a powerful discussion, but a parent raised her hand and asked how we were addressing sexual promiscuity amongst gay youth. And he said he realized at that moment that we were only talking about heterosexual students. And when she asked the question, you could feel the discomfort in the room. And that's one of the things that if you are in the LGBT community or you have a lot of experience in that, you understand that that's what happens. Safeguards for sexually diverse students are absolutely necessary because kids can be tough on one another. They're exploring who they are and what direction they want to take in life. We have a student who explores his feelings of sexual identity through his art because his parents do not allow him to explore that identity at home. And we often see that as well, that some people, some of these kids cannot explore that side of themselves at home, so they do it through curriculum at school, which is really important, why we have to have safeguards for them. All right. One of the principals wrote, I don't have any particular suggestion, but would be receptive to ideas from the building if they felt we needed to, or if it became such a problem that we needed to deal with it. Honestly, there are bigger issues that the district needs to deal with other than sexual identity. And this was a few years ago, but since I did this interview a couple of years ago, yep, we've had to deal with more mandates. We've had to deal with more high-stakes testing, teacher and administrator evaluation. Just because we have to deal with it doesn't mean that we have to ignore the safety of our students. And no one should underestimate the value of teachers, including gay people, when they talk with students about cultural diversity. Just hearing the words homosexuality, gay, lesbian, bisexual in an accepting context sends a powerful message to young people. So that's what you'll see when I start talking about literature and curriculum and even board policies. Because quite frankly, these words come up when they're watching TV or they're out in their own community. It's just silly for schools to ignore it within the whole school system. Some of our findings: the leadership practices, the curriculum deficit, and there was the professional development piece were my biggest findings, both in my dissertation and with the book. So this is what leaders can do. It would probably be helpful to have an outreach to parents, maybe to help parents accept when their kids come out. I'd like to see some educational programs for parents, because it is a hard time for them when their children come out. And one of the great organizations that I found was the Family Acceptance Project that takes place in San Francisco. And they deal a lot with parent outreach to help parents go through when their child comes out. Leadership practices: set the tone, support teachers, offer professional development on diversity, board policies, school codes of conduct, and I mentioned VADER, which is the reporting we have to do. It's violence and disruptive incidents reporting. And now with VADER, we actually are able to put not only bullying, but why they're bullying, and sexual orientation is one of the reasons that we can put in the drop-down menu, which becomes very powerful when you see that data. Set the tone. It starts with whispering the word gay. I don't know how many of you have been around when there's a conversation and somebody says he's gay, and they try not to say the word out loud. Some of that is kind of silly. You need to be able to support teachers who want to include LGBT topics into their classroom, and I'm going to get into a little bit of that in a couple of slides. And using common language. When I went to different school districts, there were some that had no common language whatsoever. They didn't know what words to use. And it's not that we have to be politically correct, but it's good to use common language so everybody knows what words to use. That's part of the problem, is people don't necessarily know what to say. So being able to say lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgendered, questioning, those are very important words, and if the whole staff is using that common language, that can be very powerful for students. Offer professional development. There are local LGBT community centers in many areas around public schools, and they offer professional development. Sometimes they offer it free because they would like to get out to the school systems. You can invite guest speakers, somebody like me, I guess. And there are many. Janie Nabasti is somebody who is very popular, and he speaks nationwide. There are a lot of guest speakers that would do a fantastic job talking to staff. Share articles that focus on social justice issues. There are many times that I send out articles to my staff, as a principal. It might be on literacy, it might be on getting kids to behave, it might be on engaging activities, but I also send them out articles that focus on LGBT issues as well. So that's something a school administrator can easily do, and it kind of sets the tone when a teacher receives that in their email. Oh, he's sending us an article on safeguarding LGBT students. It sets a tone. All right. School board policies are highly important, and I know that became a question of how do you get school board policies? School board policies must have inclusive language. So one of the ways that you can talk about school board policies with either your administrator or even the school board is the idea that you can talk about what New York State has done. California has also done very progressive things. Washington State has done progressive things. You can give those examples of how school administrators and school boards of education have introduced sexual orientation, gender expression into their board policies, basically on safeguarding under bullying, and it's very easily done, and it's a net positive. There is no reason why somebody wouldn't want to add that in. School board policies must be followed when an issue happens, which is another reason why it is so vitally important to have them in. And school board policies are only as good as the paper they are written on if follow-through does not take place. When we have school board policies, it just can't be something on the shelf or on your school website. You need to be able to follow through on the school board policies. So if a student calls somebody else a derogatory name, and you need to be able to discipline that student, you have the school board policy with you to be able to say that this is not acceptable language that's used in the school, and then you have the right to discipline that student, and you can follow through with parents as well. Right. Inclusive language, which I already spoke about, language that specifically mentions sexual orientation and gender expression. Those are the two phrases you should use on any board policy or any school code and code of conduct. And then, like I said, we have VERDER reporting in New York State, so other states might have their own system, so you can check into that. Subtle changes. Offer an LGBT section in your school library. That's very easily done. There are many, many books out there, and I'm going to show you a list in a couple of slides. Hang up posters that show you stand against LGBT bullying, because those are out there as well. You can find them on the GLSEN website. You can look at great organizations like the Trevor Project and all of those. I think those would be really great places to look for resources as well. Offer curriculum and literature. Confined to the health curriculum. That's what I found when I was doing my doctoral research, is that many times it was just confined to the health curriculum and it was only about AIDS, and that's a horrible message to be sending kids. So I think you need to be able to have this in social studies. So you can have can be very easily done. You can have debates about gay marriage, domestic partnership, even about the Boy Scout decision, equal rights. We actually had parents in my elementary school that complained about a book that we were using called Families, and they wanted me to ban it because it was a little girl out on the playground with her friends, and they were talking about different families that they live with, and one girl said that she lived with her mother and godmother, and parents thought I was pushing homosexuality in the school. I denied them and said that the book was going to stay as a first grade book. It was written in 1982. And then it went up to the assistant superintendent level, which meant that they had to put together a committee, and they supported my decision. And then it went up to the Board of Education. The Board of Education actually unanimously agreed with my decision as well. So having that in place was very important, because it was, we had a board policy about it. ELA and literature, there's some great books. My friend Peter Marino has one called Magic and Misery. Rainbow Boys by Alex Sanchez, Bait by Alex Sanchez. There are tons of LGBT-themed books that can be put into a library LGBT section. Supporting our LGBT students through Gay Straight Alliances, the Safe Space Campaign, No Name Calling Week, which can be done K-12, Ready, Set, Go, and Day of Silence. I'm going to get into each one of these really quick. So, In a study of 1,700 students in Massachusetts, Fletcher found that more than 50% of the public school systems in Massachusetts have GSAs. Gay-straight alliances are being implemented in many high schools to support student needs. In schools that have GSAs, students and school personnel report more supportive climates for LGBT students, which makes sense. But very few schools actually have GSAs in their school systems. And what the public needs to understand and what students and teachers need to understand is administrators can absolutely not block it, because there's an Equal Access Act of 1984. It allows for non-academic groups such as a GSA to form. Principals or school boards cannot stop this if it is started by a student. So if a student walks up to a principal and says, I want to start a gay-straight alliance after school, by law, if they are getting federal funding, they cannot stop that from happening. And schools can, because schools get their federal funding cut if they stop a group from forming. So that's very powerful. Lately, U.S. Secretary of Education Arne Duncan wrote an article about equal access and how it gives rights to LGBT students. GSAs should hang up posters. There are plenty of bulletin boards around school systems, and lots of people don't like to touch the bulletin boards, and the ones that are put up in September stay until June. And what GSAs could do is they could have their own bulletin board where they can hang up posters and documentation, offer public service announcements. I was with a great GSA that actually does public service announcements on the morning announcements, which is a really easy thing to do in their high school. They sponsor school dances, maybe 1 or 2 during the year. They offer resource tables to students, and they even offer resources to parents as well. So GSAs play a very, very important part in creating an inclusive school environment. GSAs are only about discussing gay issues. Please put an A for yes or B for no. Oh, good. I'm with the gifted crowd. Right. GSAs are not only about discussing gay issues. GSAs are a powerful way to talk about all issues that are happening within a school system, and it's to give an understanding of both gay and straight issues, and to give a better, because kids are allowed to have that kind of dialogue, it's a great way to create an inclusive school environment. One of the things that GLSEN puts out as a resource is the Safe Space campaign. And if you see the stickers, and I'm going to try to use the finger pointing so Dwayne is proud of me once. These are great safe space stickers that can be put in classroom windows, so LGBT students or even students who are questioning understand that that classroom is a safe space for them. What's wonderful is I have a high school principal named Colleen Gomes, who is the high school principal in my school district, and she sets an awesome inclusive environment within the school system. And many of the classrooms have safe space stickers, including her office. They have a powerful GSA, and they do a lot of these things as well. And once again, you've got a strong school administrator in place. Thank you, Dwayne, for putting great job. I'm glad you were proud of my finger pointing exercise. No Name Calling Week. It was actually inspired by a young adult novel entitled The Misfits, which I'm sure if you're in education, many of you know. It's by James Howe, and it was about 4 best friends trying to survive the 7th grade in the face of all too frequent taunts based on their weight, height, intelligence, and sexual orientation, gender expression. So GLSEN and Simon & Schuster created this together, and No Name Calling Week is done in schools across the nation. It happens for 1 week. And I have a little bit of a funny story. I have an elementary school student here who went to his mom, and it was on a Friday, and he asked if on Saturday morning he could start calling his sister names again because he was abiding by my No Name Calling Week, which I thought was wonderful. And it provides students and educators with the tools and inspiration to launch an ongoing dialogue about what needs to eliminate name calling in their communities. Another very powerful thing kids can do or schools can do is the Day of Silence. On the National Day of Silence, hundreds of thousands of students nationwide take a vow of silence to bring attention to anti-LGBT name-calling, bullying, and harassment in their schools. They are allowed to not talk throughout the whole entire day. That happens in the high school in the district where I am. Sometimes, unfortunately, you've got community pushback where you have parents that keep their kids home from school on that day, which we can get into the community pushback a bit. I'll be honest with you, there is a hate blog in my school district. I have been fodder for the hate blog because they think we push LGBT issues too much, and I ignore the blog, but I'm 41 and I can do that. But it really gave me a mindset of, what about a kid who's 15 or 14 or 13 who this happens 24/7 because of me, because of bullying that happens online or in the hallways? That kid doesn't have the same experience that I do, and they can't ignore it as much. So what can we do to protect students? And that's one of the things that we have to constantly say to ourselves, is that we ourselves don't want to be abused. Students shouldn't be abused. And we should find ways for all students to be a part of an inclusive environment. So you will get community pushback if you try some of these things, but I have to promise you, and I'm somebody who's been getting community pushback for a few years, you will be helping so many kids that you might not even know. There's only a small percentage of that community that will push back. There's a much more louder minority that would support you. So it's worth the stress that you might feel, and it's important. How do we get teachers involved? Professional development. Teachers need to know how to deal with sensitive issues, and whether we like it or not, LGBT issues are actually very sensitive, and sometimes they're controversial. I mean, the reality is LGBT students, yes, they fit in with everybody else, but when you don't have as many role models that are out there that you can see, when you're watching television shows that do not mention gay characters at all, that is very difficult, and that makes this, although a controversial topic for some reason, this makes it all the more important for school districts to get on board with this. So we need to teach teachers how to deal with sensitive issues if the word gay comes up. And those are things that can be easily done through dialogue and talking and reading. And actually, not to promote the book, but in the book I have chapter questions and those kind of things, talking points that people can discuss in book clubs. I'm a big fan of using the word acceptance and not tolerance, although there are great organizations like Teaching Tolerance from the Southern Poverty Law Center. I like the word acceptance. So if you do use something like character education words of the month, I've actually asked my school district to not use tolerance. I asked them to use the word acceptance. You can work with nonprofits. We have a great LGBT community center in the area. These are people that want to come into the school system. They want to give their resources. They want to talk about what they know. So using gay and lesbian community centers, but working with nonprofits as well, and speakers from the LGBT community. The reality is that when students leave a K-12 setting, they go out into the real world, and they have to work with very diverse people. If we don't teach them about this through the K-12 system, and their parents don't talk about it at home, they're not prepared when they go into that workforce, and they have to work with diverse people. It's still a controversial topic. Many administrators do not want to address the issue. I'm going to give you a really quick example. I did my doctoral work at a college in Albany, and the people who ran the program were very supportive of me doing LGBT issues. However, when I wrote up my IRB, the Institutional Review Board, to get approval to do this, it took all of my cohort members less than a month to get approval. It took me 5 months to get approval. And that kind of is an example of how it's still considered controversial, even at the college level. And as Todd Whitaker says, it's people, not programs. It's people like you guys that are participating in this, people that you talk to, people that you work with, that are really going to help change some of this. And it doesn't take a lot. There's a great quotation by a boy, Rochester New York student, who said, you don't have to do everything, but you do have to do something. I would show a video, but we don't really have time because we're going to be wrapping it up for questions. If you have questions, you can ask me now on the side, and I'll try to answer them the best I can. My website is there, and then my email address is there. And I know I have a couple more slides to go, but I want you to be able to see my email address. Please feel free to email me. Do you have any questions for me? This feels very one-sided on my desk because I'm talking at a screen. So I'd love to see some dialogue.
Yes, if anyone has questions, please feel free to type them in the chat room on the lower left-hand corner.
Thank you. Well, thank you. I'm glad you appreciated it. Please keep in touch. I know that before we talked about the goals that some of you have. Okay, I don't work in a school system, but want to create a safe space for LGBT youth in my community. Yes, these tips can still be applied. Absolutely. I try to talk about more of that in the book too. You know, once again, you can reach out to me, Dante, if you want to. You can send me an email and we can talk through email. I know that some of you had goals. Did I meet your goals? Thank you very much. I'm glad you found it was informative. I just want one hard question or Dwayne won't let me hang up the phone.
We'll give a minute or two just to see if people are compiling their thoughts and trying to come up with a question for you, Peter.
Yeah, yes, Dante. This will be available. I know that you're going to archive this, right, Dwayne?
Yes, this presentation will be archived on our website on Corwin.com. It should be available tomorrow. But as well, we are emailing this PowerPoint presentation to everybody who has registered for this webinar.
Oh, cool. Any ideas for recruitment for GSAs from the straight or non-LGBT community? Could you clarify a little bit? Any ideas for recruitment for GSAs? You mean in the school system? How do you get straight teens to feel okay about attending a GSA? Yeah, you know, that's a really great question, Ryan. Number one, I think it's the environment that's set in school, so it's kind of the cyclical issue that you've got going on. I venture to guess that there are many straight teens that are there that would love to be a part of it, but they're afraid about walking in the door. So I think that's where you get into public service announcements, maybe some, you know, like I said about the bulletin board, some of those kind of things. Teachers bringing it up in a classroom, that would be great. Thank you, Diana. I'm glad you liked it. Yeah, there you go, Desiree. Bring a straight friend out any day. Perfect. Oh, that's very good. And like I said, Ryan, keep in touch. You know, we can always do some ideas through email too. All right, I just want to thank everybody for participating today.
Okay, thank you.
I see one more question. How would it be possible to adapt some of these kinds of strategies in parochial Catholic schools? You're right, Dana. That's going to be a very sensitive way. I will tell you that one of the schools that I researched is where the Catholic diocese was, and that whole community has been highly supportive. And this school district actually has an outstanding GSA, and they have a lot of LGBT safeguards. So I would start by talking to the principal. I think that would be a good place to start, because I am sure that you have LGBT kids in a parochial or Catholic school. School is accepting and other parents are not. How can you engage with other parents to help them be more accepting? You know, anything from doing a day of silence and those kind of dialogues happening, whether it's a principal sending out a newsletter that talks about how they're going to be participating in the day of silence, I think those are some ways that you can find other parents to kind of get on board. I have found in my 6 years here that more and more parents have gotten on board with talking about these issues.
Okay,
All right, once again, everybody, thank you very much for participating today. I appreciate it.
And please remember that Peter's DeWitt book, Dignity for All, is available at the Corwin website at www.corwin.com. And if you use the promo code D12783, you will receive a 10% discount, and that is good through August 31st. And again, you saw Peter's contact information on that web slide. And just a reminder that we will be emailing out this PowerPoint presentation to everybody who's registered to this webinar. And finally, thank you so much, Peter. We appreciate it. And everyone, thank you so much and have a great day.
All right, thank you. Peter DeWitt.
Left. Left. The chairperson has disconnected. The conference will now end.